Welcome everyone to video chess training on YouTube. My name is William Pascal. I'm an international master, and this is a special video I've created for some of the subscribers who played in a recent simultaneous exhibition I did on Lichess. My subscribers on Twitch have the added benefit of getting some extra analysis from these games played in that event. So we're going to take a look specifically at a few games that the subscribers played in this tournament with detailed analysis. The first one is this player by the name of Move 11, rated 2047. Here, keep in mind I'm playing 25 players. These players have 40 minutes plus 40 seconds per move. For me, playing 25 players simultaneously, it's basically like each game I have the equivalent of a blitz game. So Move 11 is white, and I'm playing the Simul game at something of a handicap. Move 11 opens with e4. I'm playing the Caro-Kann, which I believe I've played against him before. He played d4 here, d5, and I think that this particular player has played e5 against me in the past, the advanced variation. But here, this time, he played knight c3. So it was interesting to see something new. I expected e5. D takes, knight takes, and now the main move for black, and I can say most positively the best move for black, is bishop f5. Driving the knight back, usually to g3. On a side note, white has a number of sidelines here. Knight c5, which is pretty well known. Knight g5, this is a weird move that I looked at with this player at least once in the past. This is a weird move, knight g5, that I looked at, in fact, I believe with move 11 in the past. Another possibility for white is knight to c3, kind of a rare move. And also the gambit line that I'll sometimes play, bishop d3, when black should objectively take the pawn on d4. I think this is probably critical, although most people, including one of our recent opponents on the stream, play something solid like bishop takes e4, bishop takes e4, knight f6. I see this fairly frequently. Again, kind of a solid variation, but not really absolutely great for black. White probably retains a slight advantage due to the bishop pair here. But the bishop pair, which I've talked about in my stream and in videos, in this kind of Caro-Kann structure, it's not completely locked. The bishop pair retains some advantage, but particularly this dark-squared bishop, I think on c1, it's not all that powerful. It's often blocked by a lot of white pawns, f2, d4, maybe c3, b2. The chain usually involves a lot of pawns on dark squares, so it's hard for white to really use the bishop pair. And in the Scandinavian Caro-Kann type of structures, not always devastating. But going back to the actual game, I played knight d7, and I should finally mention knight f6, of course. That's another move. After knight takes f6, g takes f6 is very risky for black. Playable and fun, but risky. And then there's the solid e takes f6. This variation, I think, is not a bad way to play the black side of the Caro-Kann, but doesn't really offer black as many winning chances, I would think, as the other lines. Okay, so we played knight bd7. White plays knight f3, we have knight f6, and now knight takes knight. This is a very modest move by white. I would recommend going with either knight to g5 here, the famous deep blue Kasparov match. Of course, this variation existed long ages before that game, that infamous game took place. But that's very aggressive, as well as knight g5, the previous move. You can play it right away. So I would also recommend here, instead of knight f3, bishop c4. This is a very strong line. Or knight g5 straight away. Again, this is the Kasparov playing black against deep blue. Knight g5 with threats. These lines are the most aggressive possibilities. Anyway, we have going back, knight takes e4, knight d7, knight f3, knight f6, and now knight takes knight. Another interesting line for white, kind of the older main line, is knight to g3. Typically, I really don't like putting knights on knight 3 squares. But in this particular variation, h5 is kind of over the top. I don't think this is quite sound. I was looking at trying to chase the knight on g3, but it seems that bishop g5, quite a strong move in answer to h5. So black can't really exploit that knight on g3. Knight g3 remains kind of standard line to keep the pieces on the board. There's Ivan Karpov, Anatoly Karpov, a big purveyor of this variation for black. So now we have knight takes f6, knight takes f6, and then c3 over protecting the d4 square. Bishop g4, and now white, I think, makes a small mistake. He plays bishop e2. It looks like he should play h3 here, and probably black's best is taking on f3. Bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, and I found some game with queen d5, but one would imagine that just simply like e6 would be the best move. I mean, I don't think that black should go out of his way to try to trade queens. Just play naturally here. I think the queen is actually misplaced on f3. And I saw one game where my old friend Anna Ushanina got in trouble by playing like queen takes f3, queen d5, queen e3, queen e4. She went out of her way to trade queens in this game against Varavin, and ended up losing in a game back in 2002. So I think this probably leaves white with a sizable bishops against bishop and knight kind of endgame advantage. We shouldn't be in a rush to play that. So the queen on f3 is kind of misplaced. We would just play naturally with e6 here. Black should have a good game. I noticed that even there's g6 available there. But move 11 should try this nevertheless. If bishop h5, g4, this is a much improved variation over what he did against me in the game. g4, bishop g6, knight e5. And you may wonder about bishop e4 here. Let's turn on the engine and see what it thinks. The main move is knight to d7. I didn't really like the look of this, honestly. There's a couple games here. Rene against Salgado Lopez. That was a draw, but I still don't 100% trust black's position. This looks like a little better for white after take d5. I don't know, this position kind of gives me the creeps for black, honestly. The white squared bishop on f1 looks pretty powerful. And this white squares start to open up here. So I'm not sure I'd really want to go here. This looks not that reliable for black. Knight d7 maybe not the best move. We have other possibilities like e6, for example, and certainly interesting move here. Instead to play bishop e4. That's kind of provocative. So I'm not sure if we can get away with this or not. Bishop e4, f3. And now bishop d5. A number of games, Morozevich, Kamsky. So you're in good company trying this more experimental variation. There's a Naroditsky-Kamsky game that was a draw. I mean, obviously it looks a little bit dangerous. c4, bishop e6, and this is some kind of game that I really don't know who these players are. It could be a correspondence game. A little bit risky for black to induce this advance by white. So I don't know, risky. But anyway, this is kind of the best way white could play. If we go back to the game, move 11 tried to do something similar. He played instead bishop e2 straight away, and then tried to do the same thing. But I don't think it's quite as good, and I think the black should have equalized, or did equalize. Now, bishop e4 probably not really viable here. I'll lose a piece, I would imagine. So knight d7. I could play other moves, I suppose. This felt natural to me. Knight takes. You don't see d5 here as a possibility for white in that other variation. So, but move 11 reacted well. He played like king f1. I thought this was cool, putting his king on g2. And you know, perhaps I played a little bit passively in this position. I could have played bishop d6 with the idea of queen c7. And I think that was by far the best. Trying to trade the bishop pair. Bishop d6, queen c7, bishop f4 was really something I tried to do in the game a little bit too late. So bishop e7, king g2, queen c7. Now I ended up losing a tempo moving the same piece twice when I realized the right plan. He played here queen b3, which actually stops bishop f4 by pressuring b7, and I think that white might have a slight advantage at this point. If I castle queenside, the game seems very sharp, and if I don't castle queenside, I'm kind of tied down to b7. So I played a neutral move, and he starts to play centrally, which I thought is good. You know, rook d1. This move is interesting. Rook f1, like thinking about that bishop there on e3. If I capture it, then suddenly he's going to have to play along the f file. I played g5, and now c4, and now clearly he's threatening to play d5. So it looks like this is the moment for me to castle, I would think, at this point. And instead of castling, thinking about the h file, I decided to play knight f6, trying to stop d5. And he played d5 anyway. And this is really brilliant. I mean, I just didn't see or foresee this possibility as serious. So the fact that my a7 pawn is hanging on a7 didn't occur to me. And the position is quite complicated. He could play d6. If I play bishop takes e3, he has d6, for example. It's rather awkward for black suddenly. So he's basically sacking a pawn to open the position. I just didn't notice my a7 pawn was going to fall. And it does. And the problem is, when I save the exchange with something like rook a8, he has bishop b6. And I feel like white has got to be slightly better here because my king is still in the center. And I just absolutely freaked out trying to sacrifice an exchange due to time pressure, constraints, and other things here. There's just no reason to sacrifice the exchange. I have to play rook a8 and bishop b6 and then move my queen. There's also bishop c5, but I think it's hard to decide which one of these is better. Perhaps bishop c5, preventing me from castling. It's difficult to say. Knight e4 and then bishop b6. Luring my knight forward, bishop b6, queen has to find a place to go, and it's very awkward for black. It looks like white's better. Instead, I sacrificed the exchange here, and it was a really one-sided game after that. I just don't get enough compensation after bishop takes castles. I thought, okay, I've got a pawn, a good bishop, my structure is pretty solid, but it's just too much material. I'm basically just down an entire exchange. And then move 11 played really well after this. Excellent technique. He's pressuring the d5 strong point. I have to give it up. Then he takes. Now his rooks have open lines. It's just a very good position for him. This was a bad move by me in time pressure to play c5, but I just couldn't find a really good solution for black here at this point. So we'll go on from here. Basically, white has a winning material advantage at this point. And I'll just comment on any kind of obvious mistakes. I don't like c5 by me. This pawn structure at c6, b7 is actually negating or sort of denying his white squared bishop. By playing c5, I thought I could mobilize my pawns, but it just makes the white squares all that much weaker. And this was a great move. Just a great move. I mean, stopping my obvious intention of b5. Of course, he could have done other things like a4. And then b6, now my pawns are fixed, and I have a lot of white square weaknesses. And notice his rooks. Sometimes when one side is up the exchange, a minor exchange of rook for knight or bishop, it's not that effective. But this kind of position where his rooks have the ultimate open files, this is probably the worst case scenario. Nothing I could do. I mean, his bishop, queen, two rooks, everyone is working. And even if I played perfect moves, I don't think that black could hold on here. Trading rooks, it's probably good for him, I would think, this having the single remaining rook. And a good tactical resource, queen c6. And right about here, he penetrates to the back rank. I play king g6. The best for me would be able to play g6 followed by king g7. But for some reason, I was in time pressure and I didn't find time to do that. He played rook b8 right, and I couldn't defend myself. I think there's just simply no way to hold on here. I played rook a7, rook takes b6, yes, and there's just no time. He's on the 7th rank, threatening to crush me, so I had to play king g6 to defend my pawn. And then there's a second rook coming down, and it's just devastating. I thought this was good technique by my opponent. I was hoping to defend g7 with the bishop, but I'm too late. And move 11 goes on to win easily here, forcing an exchange of rooks. If you're up material, trade pieces. I can't say it enough. Perhaps here I could have tried c4, c3, but my pawn is never going to get through on the white squares. And he sets a perfect position, bishop on c2, with a mating net and zugzwang, as well as blockading my passed pawn. So kudos with the good technique for move 11. I resigned here. Let's go on to the next game. We had several players who are actually subscribers to my Twitch stream. They were Clash Kid, he's the second one, and two others. So we're white in this one. This is a player who has played regularly in my Simuls here on Lee Chess. I'm white. He's an interesting player, very, I think, aggressive and combative, and he plays some creative chess. Not a stereotyped kind of player. So here we're looking at a Benko gambit after c5, d5, b5. I accept. Recently someone was asking me what's the best way to play against the Benko gambit. I think in the accepted variations there's a number of good lines. e3. This is a variation that has a very good reputation. Another possibility is f3. This line also has a good reputation for white. Look at the statistics here. f3, 37% wins, 32% losses. e3, the statistics are absolutely off the charts. 41% wins, 24% losses, so that's like the professional move. And then the move in the game, I played b6, is another one which I recommend highly. So black can play a whole different way. I mean, a whole bunch of different ways here. Queen takes b6, d6, a5, g6. Take your pick. Pretty much everything has been tried. He just takes straight away. I don't know that, you know, this is the best, but as good as anything, I suppose. So we have knight f3 now, and then bishop g7, e4, and now he delays castling. And I subsequently played another game with this player where I changed my move order to play the move knight to d2 here. And I think I like this a little bit better. Our subsequent game in, I believe, blitz chess was knight d2, and my opponent here played bishop d7, which is an interesting idea. Try to play bishop b5 and trade the pieces off. That's quite interesting. It went something like knight c4, queen c7, and then a4, stopping bishop b5. This was our game. See what the engine says here. I think white has to retain a significant edge in this position. Black's pieces are a little hard to work with. So going back, in this game I allowed a different sequence. I played bishop e2, and then he played bishop d7, a4, bishop g4. This was interesting. I had never seen anyone do this before. I mean, I've seen players go bishop g4 straight away in this position. This actually exists, and it scores quite well for black. The idea, kind of like in the Benko, in the Benoni, to play bishop takes f3 and to trade pieces, make the position a little easier for black. But I'd never actually seen this inducing a4, which I think is quite interesting. There's actually one game here. White played e5. Karsten Hoy played e5. This may in fact be a good move. It had not occurred to me. Looks like black must take. Knight takes e5, but I'm just not sure how much white is really achieved through this. Black could play a number of moves here. Bishop b5, 94 castles. There was one game that was a draw with bishop b5, so I'm not sure that I'm that convinced by Karsten Hoy's plan. I don't know that white really has achieved anything with this e5 break. He worsened black's pawn structure, but also worsened his own. So instead, I went back to kind of standard plan here, a4 stopping bishop b5. He plays bishop g4, and now I played a5 grabbing space, ensuring that later on he won't have a piece on b6. Now he could possibly go back to d7, but I don't think so. And now the interesting question is this, knight d2, trading white squared bishops, taking with the queen. We have a space advantage because of the knight coming to c4, and black played h5. I thought this was a very strange move by black, position where he doesn't really know what to do. Typically, you might prefer to have the queen on b7. I wonder if it wouldn't be better for black to put his queen on b7 straight away. If we go back to move 11, I've seen Shirov play queen a7. Queen b4 is interesting, of course, but queen b7, because you keep pressure on the b file, but that's not the main point. The main point would be to keep c7 free and maneuver something like knight e8, knight c7, knight b5 later on. And if our queen's not competing with our other pieces, I think we're going to do better there. So that's a good suggestion for an improvement in the whole setup for black. If Clash Kid does this again, I think the queen on b7 might be better. I didn't really like h5. Played h3. Now he plays rook a b8. It may well be better to go with the other rook, rook f b8, keeping the a6 pawn protected. But who knows? If I can't attack it, if I can't attack it, it doesn't matter. And here I played f4. Now it's possible to play this position in another way. Apparently I could play knight a4 with the idea of knight b6. That looked kind of artificial to me, to say the least. I suppose development with something like bishop g5 would be possible. Lots of different possibilities. White has a space advantage, no doubt, but black's counterplay along the b file is not to be taken lightly. So I go with this kind of straightforward plan of blasting through with e5, f4, and now knight e8 I guess was too passive here for black. But it's hard to recommend a good plan. I mean, I think h5 was a bad move that weakened black's position. And if he hadn't done that, he'd have more resources, although he does have knight h7 here. I don't really like black's position a whole lot. Knight e8 was passive, and I missed my opportunity to play f5 in this position. This apparently, according to the engine, would have been somewhat like my plan in the game, but not as risky as what we got. So I think a nice slight advantage for white after f5. But I tried to do the sealer sweeper pawn sacrifice here. It was just asking too much for my position, and it probably wasn't that bad. Takes, and then I could recapture, but I don't see what I've got. If I do recapture, if he takes with the knight, I have bishop f4. Maybe that's good for me. This may be very, very good for white. Probably forcing f6. Kind of unpleasant position for black. He could, however, take with the bishop. The lesser of the evils. Still, this seems pleasant for white. Knight takes e5. Queen takes e5. And do I dare take the pawn on a6? I would think so, because that creates a very, very powerful passed pawn for white. So apparently I missed the boat here. I mean, this was really not too bad. We have an advantage in all variations after e5. Pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn. But I got carried away with this pawn sacrifice f5. Not a terrible move, but I think that black could play this in a number of ways. Knight d6 was good. And here I just really lost my mind. I don't have much time, and I mean on the board especially. So probably I have to play pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, like this. Rook takes rook. And I don't know which way he should recapture here. Difficult to say. With a knight, with a rook. With the rook, maybe. It's not really doing anything. It looks active on the b file, but what is it doing? Can I take the pawn on a6? No. Knight takes d6, queen takes d6. So it looks like at the end of the day, white has some compensation due to structure based on the pawn sacrifice I made. But I'm not really clearly better here. Maybe a small advantage at best. But I went completely astray, and I played a crazy move to try to keep pieces on the board. Knight e3. This is a normal move in a positional situation where you have more space to try to keep pieces on the board. I think, but the illusion that I was under was that I had more space. And that becomes very clear here that that's not the case. He's played h5, he has a pawn on e5, and now after the next move, c4, it becomes evident that I don't have more space than my opponent. I actually do have pawns at f5 and d5, but black has pawns on e5 and c4. He has the b file, h5. It's just not a great situation, and my knight on e3 is actually blocking my bishop on c1. So I'm much worse now. And his pieces just come to life. His knight comes in here. White is struggling to survive. I take this pawn. He wins the exchange, basically. And I was just praying to hang on here. Now, this is a very interesting situation, where if we look with the engine, probably keeping the pieces on. Yeah, this was okay. Knight b3. In this key position here, I didn't know what to play. Very bad time pressure. Exchanging on g6 and exchanging rooks didn't really appeal to me. Trading pieces when I'm down material. But it may be possible. I was looking for some kind of direct attack, and that's why I played f6. Apparently this is just a very serious mistake because my bishop on c1 was attacked. I think I just didn't realize that's going to hang, so there's really no time for anything. I think I was looking at d6. I wanted to make this move work, but after e takes d6, f6, he has the intermezzo knight takes c1, which takes time and will allow him to play like bishop h6. It doesn't look good for me here. I just don't think I have enough compensation. The computer actually is looking at rook takes c1 and d5, which is an astounding move. Sacrificing the bishop on g7. Just amazing. Yeah. We're gonna win a piece back here, it looks like. Knight a2, perhaps? Can I play knight a2? Yes, queen takes a5. Knight a2, queen takes a5. It looks like the two knights are having a bad time of it in this position. Black would be probably close to winning. So, going back to the game, things got worse. And I was lucky to even have a chance later on. A little bit later on, I did get a bit of a chance. So we've got the actual game continuation. f6 that I played here. Yeah, I don't think I really had a chance. It was an illusion. I was under the illusion that I had a chance in this position, but we lost the piece. We lost pretty much everything. At the very end, there was something that looked like hope. If you check this out, I was in very bad time pressure. I played rook takes f6. This was an excellent move by my opponent, knight g3 check. And he decoys my pieces away. And then I really believed that I might have been okay here at the end. But apparently, I don't have perpetual check. That's the question in this position. Could I possibly have perpetual check? And if he goes back, even there, I'm not sure. King g7, yes, is a perpetual check. So he found the only move here, king f5. And in my mind, I thought, okay, I've got chances, but I don't think the chances are enough. His queen and rook are too strong. This passed pawn here looks mighty, but he's threatening mate on g2. And I did see it at the time. When I captured on g6, I mean, I realized I was defending the mate. And I check again. Played d7, and I blundered mate and hung the g2 pawn. I was very badly in time pressure there. Okay, we have time to look at one more game for these subscribers from our Simul stream. Let's take a look at one more from the stream here. So Bob, we had a game against Bob Sacamano here, which became very one-sided, but I'm not sure it wasn't interesting to look at the opening. So let's start with the beginning. Knight f3, g6. This was actually Hippopotamus, which is a formation that you can play with double fianchetto. Bishop g7, d4, e6. This is a strange move. I don't know why Bob chooses e6. If you want to play this kind of position, it's better to play d6. If you want to be really, really hyper modern, you can play a6 probably. But I've seen this more commonly against knight to c3. So e6, not an accurate move. But if you want to play the Hippopotamus, you can do it against everything. Actually got some games now. In this position, Yilmaz, Malikov, Hal, Stefanova. These guys were actually playing this against a c4, d4, e4 type of setup. I think that objectively, the most accurate way for white to play is to play knight c3 here. So c4 transposing to a kind of the topical position. Antoinetta has played this 3 times with 50%, losing to Howell and scoring 1.5 out of 2 against 2 other players. But b6, reasonable move. Black goes his own way. Knight c3, bishop b7. I'm a little surprised that there are no games in the master database here. Bishop d3. Eventually, we've got to get to a kind of normal hippo. d6. I'm sorry, knight e7, castles. And it's definitely a position now. Pavel Blatny with the game for 2017, losing to his old friend Zbigniew Kracek. There was a time, I think it was like 1995 or so, when Pavel Blatny won the New York Open. I played Zbigniew Kracek in the same tournament, holding him to a draw with black. I remember that, and Pavel taking the tournament down, but Kracek's 26-10 and Blatny's 23-88. That's 2017, guys. It's a new game. Kracek maintained his strength. Blatny has a tendency to play some very strange openings. So there's a number of games. Edward Gufeld, and then some others. Facundo Piero from Argentina has played with white here. White scores 3 out of 4. Anyway, we're still in book. Rookie 1. And who am I following? Gufeld. We're playing like Eddie. Big Ed. I was fortunate enough to beat Edward Gufeld and draw 1.5 out of 2 in the black side of the Sicilian. One day I'll find those games. He almost took me out in a carries attack. Let's see there. All right, Rookie 8. This was the first mistake by Mr. Bob Sacamano. So, Bob, your rook could actually be useful. I mean, you could theoretically play f5 in this type of position, and I think the rook would activate naturally there. It's a kind of risky move, though. You notice here that Gaprindashvili, who was, I believe, a women's world champion at some point, and Jonathan Tisdall both played d6 in this position. This is the classic hippopotamus formation. You're going to play d6, develop the knight to d7, maybe a6 should be played, and you can meet something like a4 with a5. Actually, at this point, I guess there's no need for a6. There's no threat of bishop a6 or something like that. Just d6 followed by knight to d7. That would be fine. But Bob played rook e8, which is a very strange and mysterious move. Kind of copying my rook move. it felt like. But there's no real point to rook e8 here. Bishop g5, probing the dark squares, and then knight to c6. This isn't really good. d6, knight d7 is the normal hippo formation, so that you don't block your bishops on g7 and b7. If anything else, I expected h6 here. I think h6 is a move black can afford. But instead, he played f6 a little bit later on. Knight c6, I could have played d5. I decided to just be kind of flexible. And then a5, another bad move, weakening the queen side. The b5 square particularly could be a problem. Queen d2, f6, blocking the bishop on g7. And now bishop h6. Not necessarily forced. I mean, white could certainly consider retreating the bishop back to e3 here. But I'm a little congested. It is a pretty good bishop. I think there's a lot of dark square weaknesses for black. That'll be seen in the game here. And then d5. This is kind of a crazy move. Black can't really afford to do much of anything here, but I guess d5 is not so bad under the circumstances. d5, bishop takes g7, king takes g7, c takes d5, and then e5. I thought I was just with a huge advantage at this point, and I think it's about a pawn and a half according to the computer. Pure positional advantage. Now the black king getting opened up on the dark square complex here all around there. The dark square is weak because the bishops have been traded. Perhaps something like rook f8, where the rook really should have remained in the first place, is the best move. Plays knight f5, bishop b5, and now suddenly we're fighting for the e5 square and the web of dark square weaknesses, the dark square complex. Kind of like a failed double queen pawn opening. That's what it feels like. Usually in the double king pawn openings, you see the d5 square fall, and then the web of white squares fall apart, like in the Sicilian, in the Roy Lopez. When the queen pawn opening goes bad, it's usually like the e5 point falls, and the dark squares go bad. So that's the case here. Queen d7, things get worse. I don't know what he can do there instead of queen d7. Again, rook f8, probably unpinning himself from the danger of protecting f6. And here I just have a space advantage and a really pleasant position after bishop takes c6. Bishop takes c6. We have two powerful knights against the bad bishop and knight in a closed game. White with a clear positional advantage. Not a winning position, just a very good position for white. So I think Bob committed suicide here by pinning himself a second time with the second piece on the same diagonal. And that's it. We win easily. Pawn takes pawn, king takes pawn, knight e5 with a devastating pin. Queen d6, g4 is coming. First I trade bishop for a good knight, and then he's got the bad bishop there. He's tied down to that tactically. And g4 just pries open the area around his king for a decisive attack. And he really can't avoid losing a piece here. He tried knight takes d4, which is a nice try, because if I take immediately as rook takes e5, it looks like. I'm not sure that even doesn't work. Yeah, I can just take immediately. Come to think of it, I didn't see this over the board for some reason, but I'm just playing f4 here. So this just doesn't work at all for Bob. He's just lost in this position. There's no way to save it. The best move is king g7, just losing a knight basically at this point. So it got ugly after that. Knight takes d4, queen f4 check. Actually an inaccurate move. He has knight f5 here. Probably the best. And suddenly I realize that he's threatening my knight there. I take. Rook takes e5, and at this point he's actually okay, believe it or not. Because in this position he missed rook f5. So I made a horrific mistake. If we go back here to this position, I have to find this just crazy tactic, knight takes c6. So I didn't see to allow my queen hanging. Knight takes c6, queen takes f4, knight takes d5 check. And I get my material back at the end of the day with a piece up. It's crazy. So we were already getting into some time pressure here. I overlook this. Bob takes. I play pawn takes pawn. He overlooks rook f5, probably saving the game. And he played instead king e6, getting mated in 1. So if he had played this move, if he had played the heads up rook f5, I'm not sure how much better I am here objectively, if I'm even better at all, because his bishop can turn into a very strong piece. In fact, my king might come under attack, so I probably have to trade queens, play this endgame, where I'm still very, very worried about the position of my king. G takes h7, and this bishop is a really dangerous piece. So it was mutual mistakes by both of us near the end there. But again, every Sunday I play a Simul on Lichess at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And these were games played by my subscribers on Twitch. I'd like to sort of thank everyone here for subscribing and liking my videos on YouTube. Please feel free to share the videos with your friends.